What's going on everyone, my name is Tom from Dreadlabs and today we're going to make this vintage pop art effect.
Dreadlabs.
Alright guys, so I recently released a new asset pack containing a lot of different types of assets and it's mainly revolving around comic books and halftone effects, and that's why I wanted to do this quick video for you guys to show you how to create these easy effects inside Photoshop. So let's just begin with grabbing a model and I got this model from Unsplash. So I'll just make a new document and let's get started. So this photo is by Brooke Kaggle, I hope I pronounced that correctly, on Unsplash. And the first thing we're going to do is cut out this model, and there's a super easy way for that in Photoshop. You go to select at the top menu, click on subject, and we now have a pretty much almost perfect selection of our subject in the photo here. So we'll go down to the bottom here in the layer menu. I'll just drag it out for you guys so you can see what I'm clicking on, and make a layer mask. So basically we now have a transparent cutout of our model here. And don't worry if the edges here aren't the best, because for what we're going to use this today, there's really no need to do this any more perfectly than Photoshop does it itself. So the next thing we're going to do is add a new solid color layer. And again, I'm going to drag out my layer menu to show you where to find that. So you go here and click on solid color. Let's go with a nice blue. Of course, you can pick any type of color you want. And we'll drag this to the bottom here. So in today's video, I just wanted to showcase the latest Dreadlabs asset pack that I've been working on. It's the Dreadlabs comic pack, and it contains a couple of layer styles, a couple of Photoshop actions, some shapes, and some patterns as well. So basically what you do with this is you make sure that you install all of these three forms. So the way you do that is by going to Window, Styles, and then you just click on this button here and click on Import Styles, and then you can see in the folder of the comic pack the ASL file, and you can just easily load that in. You basically do the same for the Photoshop actions. So you go to Window, Actions, click on the little menu here, load in actions, load in that file, and do the same with patterns. So you go to Window, Patterns, click on the button here again, click on Import Patterns, and then import the patterns file. So basically that's how you install this pack, but what does it do? So essentially what I have here is a pack that contains a couple of vector shapes related to comic books and pop art. I also have a couple of Photoshop actions that will make your photos look like either halftone patterns to make it a little bit look more like pop art, I guess, or as comic book illustrations. Other than that, I also have a couple of actions to change your vector shapes into actual pop art shapes, which is pretty cool. And to top it all off, I have a couple of layer styles to make your shapes look a little bit more pop arty, if that makes sense. So let me just show you a couple of different effects out of the action pack. Let me just duplicate this to a new file. And I'm actually going to delete the layer mask so you can see what this style does. So the first one is the vintage airbrush style. We'll just click and wait a little bit for this to be finished. And here we have a super nice vintage comic book like effect. I really dig the texturized fills here and the types of shading. Works really well for this photo. So another one is the comic book style. Let's just click on this and run it. And this gives you that more old school comic book vibe, as you can see with the lines and inks. So basically what I've done here is once you actually purchase the pack, you can see all of the movements I do to make this effect. You can actually try to do these yourself as well. They're not that hard, of course. Most of it is just combining a couple of layers and different types of filters in the filter gallery, which I found out really complement each other. Same goes for the layer styles. They're pretty easy to make, but if you purchase this pack, you really help me and my YouTube channel out, basically helping me making more videos for you guys, keep up the weekly videos and tutorials, and yeah, keep this platform up and running. And of course, if you don't want to spend $5 on it, or if you don't have the money to spend $5 on it, feel free to learn them yourself, and I hope you still get something out of this video. Anyways, let's go back to the actual tutorial. What we're going to do is run the pop art style here on the photo. And as you can see, we have this nice halftone effect. And the cool thing about these actions as well is if we open up the group here, you can basically see what I've done here. So basically the photo consists of two different layers, the colored layer and the halftone layer. And in this case, I really like the halftone, but I want the dots to be a little bigger. And there's actually a nice way to do that. You just have to double click on the filter gallery in the layer menu. And you can see that there's the halftone pattern, and you can just increase the size here. So in my case, let's just make them 4, so you can really see the dots here. I really like that. And another upside about this is that you can still manipulate the rest of this. So for example, let's just say that we want to change the color of this. As you can see in the original design, we had a yellow background and a blue fill. Let's just reverse that for a second. We'll go to adjustments, on gradient map. And while holding Alt or Option on our keyboard, we'll make sure that the gradient map is clipped to our photo only. So now we only change the color of our model here. And let's do a couple of experiments. Let's go with like a tomato red. And perhaps like a very vibrant yellow. That's pretty cool. Alright, so yeah, that's our model here. I'll just rename this to model real quick so we know what we have here. So the next part is also part of the comic book pack, but of course you can make these shapes yourself in Illustrator or in Photoshop if you want to. This is just to save myself some time. Basically, the pack contains a couple of pop art and explosion comic book shapes, if you will. So in my case, let's just drag in the explosion 2. We'll put that behind her head, because I think that's pretty nice. We'll drag this down. And let's go to Window, Styles. And here in the Dreadlabs comic book layer styles, you can see what I've done here. And let me just drag on and drop this on our explosion. And as you can see, we now have that like comic book effect, I guess. You can also change the color if you would like to. So for example, I could change this to red if I wanted to. I think I'm going to leave it at white. I think it's pretty cool. The next thing I'm going to do is actually add some text. So the font that I'm using here is called Gertner, and you can find it on Adobe Fonts. So if you have an Adobe subscription, basically this font is for free. And we'll change the color to white. And we'll change the size to 300 or something. And we'll drag this in front of our model. And let's just make it a little bit bigger. And let's try out another one of these styles here. Perhaps we should do this one. And that's pretty cool. And perhaps you can also use some other shape in the background. Let's try a pop art explosion. And as you can see here, this is just one of the explosions with a halftone effect on it. And basically we also have the same one without halftone. So what's pretty cool about this is that we can just add a layer style to the top one, like this, and then make the shadow look, give that like halftone effect here at the bottom. So we'll group these together and call this explosion. I will drag it down. And let's change the color of the explosion here. And let's go with a magenta color. I pretty much like that as it is. Alright, so if you're satisfied with the composition here, I'm actually going to make the explosion and the text a tiny bit smaller so it doesn't cover her face that much. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of the stuff in our layer menu here. Alright, the next thing we're going to do is actually make this look a little bit more vintage, and we're going to do that by texturing. So I'm going to grab all of our layers here, group them together and call this group design. And let's just add a couple of textures. And the textures I'm going to add are from my own Dreadlabs paper pack volume 2. So basically this pack contains a couple of vintage papers, some sandpaper and also some cardboard. And I found that you can get some pretty cool vintage looking textures with these. So let's just drag one in. And let's just drag that below our design and change the blend mode of our design group to multiply. And as you can see, we can now see the shades of the darker parts of our texture bleeding through our design. Pretty nice. Let's just hold Alt or Option on our keyboard and click and drag our vintage paper on top of our design as well. And let's just double click on it now. And we're going to experiment with the blend if layer here. So basically what we're going to do is remove all of the darker parts from our layer and have in like a little bit of the highlights blend in with our image. So I'm going to hold Alt or Option on my keyboard and drag the right part of this arrow to the right. And now I can also drag the left part of the arrow more to the right as well, until you are satisfied with the result. And I pretty much like this. Let's lower the opacity just a little bit so it doesn't look as harsh. And that looks pretty cool. So the next part is going to look a little bit weird in the beginning, but stay with me. I'm going to drag in a cardboard texture, put it on top here. And actually what I'm going to do is change the blend mode to screen. And if you know about like blend modes, you know that the screen basically leaves all the light colors and removes all the dark colors. But our texture is of course looking very light. So what I'm going to do is actually press Control or Command on my keyboard and the letter I, which inverses it. So basically what we have the normal blend mode is we have a darker texture. Basically the colors are inversed, and putting that to screen basically helps us get a lighter texture in anyway, if that makes sense. So yeah, if this is a little bit complicated to you and you want to learn more about textures, I actually have a free tutorial on my YouTube channel about like the works of textures, how to use textures and blend modes. So yeah, the link for that will be in the description. Alright, so to finalize everything, so the textures look realistic, but if we zoom into the explosion here, for example, the lines are really harsh. And what I'm going to do is basically right click on my group, convert it to a smart object. And basically our design is now a small PSD file inside our working file. So if we want to change anything of the design right now, you can just double click on the thumbnail here, and then we have a separate Photoshop file with our design. The reason I'm doing this is because now we can add filters to this. So what I'm going to do is add a couple of displacement maps. In order to actually use a displacement map, what I'm going to do is make my design invisible. And as you can see, we now have just the texture here. What I'm going to do is press Command or Control, Alt or Option, Shift and the letter E on my keyboard, which basically makes a duplicate layer that's flattened out of what's visible right now. And in our case, that's just the texture that we've been using. I'm going to duplicate this to a new file and call it displacement map. And we're going to save it up. And in this new file, we're going to remove the color. And we're going to do that by going to Image, Adjustments, Black and White. And we'll click OK. And we're going to increase the contrast a little bit by going to Image, Adjustments, Levels. And we'll just squeeze in the darker parts a little bit. And drag the right slider to the left a bit. And as you can see, that just added a little bit more detail. And we want to blur this out a little smidge, so we're going to go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. The radius will be 0.5 pixels. And we're going to save this up as a PSD file. So back in the original file, we can just delete this layer and make our design visible again. And we're going to select our design in the layer menu. We're going to go to Filter, Distort, Displace. You can leave all these settings as they are. Click on OK, and this will ask you to load in the file, and then we'll just load in the displacement map that we just made. And if we click on Open, as you can see, the lines are now a little bit distorted. So you can probably see it better without all the textures. As you can see, this is with the displacement map, and this is without it. So yeah, it definitely makes it look a little bit more realistic. And to finish it off, to make the colors transition a little bit better, is I'm going to go Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and a 0.5 radius should be fine. So should you have that like small cutoff here because of the displacement map, what I usually do is just make the whole composition a tiny bit bigger, like this. Alright guys, there you have it, a couple of vintage pop art techniques. So yeah guys, like I said, most of the assets that I used in my video here are available on my web store, and by buying them you really help me out, supporting me and basically making me be able to make more tutorials for you guys, because there's really not that much money in YouTube ads, sadly. Anyways, you can also just get the project file for this tutorial and for all of my other tutorials by becoming a patron of mine. So besides getting access to all of my project files for my tutorials, you also get access to a 15% discount in my Dreadlabs web store, as well as an exclusive Discord role. If you go one tier up, you'll also have access to exclusive tutorials. For example, I just posted a new video on how to make death metal logos from scratch. So if you want to learn stuff like that, you can also become a part of the inner core. And of course, by becoming a patron, you also help me out keeping this channel alive and making me able to give you guys more videos on a weekly basis. So yeah, if this is something you're interested in, there's a link down in the bio. If you don't have the money to support the channel, leaving a like, a comment and a subscribe also does enough. So yeah guys, thank you so much for watching. This was Tom from Dreadlabs tuning out, and I'll see you guys in the next video.